The day September 11, 2001 is often distilled down to a sequence of tragic moments, almost like a simple timeline.
Hmm.
But to truly understand the world-altering impact of that single morning, we have to explore all the cumulative factors.
Right. It's so much more than a timeline. You have the years of calculated planning, the critical intelligence breakdowns that almost defy belief.
And then the moment-by-moment chaos of the attacks themselves and the immense decades-long global repercussions that followed.
Our mission here is exactly that, to take the historical record, the investigative findings, and all the policy analysis that came after and synthesize it for you.
So we're going beyond just the headline facts.
Way beyond. We want to explore the complex chain of causation, from the ideological roots that fueled al-Qaeda right up to the reconstruction efforts and the immense ongoing global cost of the ensuing conflicts.
We want to ensure you have a comprehensive understanding, focusing on the most factual and surprising details from the records we have. That means we have to start at the beginning. Understanding that the violence of 9/11 wasn't a sudden eruption, but really the culmination of a decade-long ideological war against the United States.
It was.
Let's start with the motives and that initial declaration of war.
The origins of al-Qaeda's war against the U.S. can be traced pretty directly back to Osama bin Laden's 1996 fatwa.
His religious edict.
Yes. This was his first major declaration of war, and while it was broad, the central demand was actually very specific.
Which was?
The immediate expulsion of all American soldiers from the Arabian Peninsula, particularly Saudi Arabia, which, contains Islam's holiest sites.
And that initial declaration sort of served as a framework for what came next.
It did. By 1998, they issued a second fatwa. This one was much more specific and served as the direct justification cited for the 9/11 attacks.
And this subsequent statement laid out 3 core grievances, all about American foreign policy.
Yes, and these weren't vague criticisms. They were very calculated accusations designed to motivate and, in their view, justify the violence against America.
So what were those 3 objections?
Okay, so the first was U.S. support of Israel in its conflict with Palestine.
Right.
The second was the economic sanctions being levied against Iraq, which al-Qaeda claimed resulted in the deaths of Iraqi children.
And the third grievance.
And this was perhaps the most incendiary point for their specific theological base. It was the third objection, the continued presence of U.S. military bases and troops in Saudi Arabia following the Gulf War.
Which they saw as an occupation.
An occupation of sacred Muslim land, exactly. Bin Laden claimed that Muslims were obliged to attack American military and civilian targets until these policies were reversed.
The ultimate goal cited by al-Qaeda went beyond just killing Americans, though. They were highly strategic, at least in their own twisted view.
Oh, absolutely. They openly discussed forcing the U.S. to fundamentally reevaluate its foreign policy globally.
Hoping to compel the American people to choose a more, what they called, nationalistic government that wouldn't intervene in the Middle East.
Exactly. But the long-term strategic goal was really economic attrition. They explicitly aimed to destroy and bankrupt the U.S. economy, which they correctly saw as the foundation of American global military power.
And regarding the specific tactic of attacking skyscrapers, bin Laden later offered a startling and highly personal explanation for that.
He did. You're referring to his 2004 taped statement.
Yes, where he described the genesis of the idea.
He claimed the idea for destroying the towers was rooted in an experience he had back in 1982. He witnessed Israel's bombardment of high-rise apartment buildings during the Lebanon War.
And he said they should punish the oppressor in kind.
Yes, so that America, quote, could taste some of what we tasted. This idea of proportional revenge became central to the targeting.
That narrative confirms that the attacks were intended to be acts of retribution and just immense visible spectacle. And the rhetoric bin Laden used made it chillingly clear that this violence was meant to be indiscriminate. It blurred the lines between military and civilian targets.
He was unequivocal on that point. In a 1998 interview, bin Laden stated plainly that they, quote, do not differentiate between those dressed in military uniforms and civilians. They are all targets in this fatwa.
He rejected any moral distinction.
Completely. He asserted that America itself historically didn't distinguish between civilians and military, and he would cite, for example, the nuclear bombings of Japan.
And his conclusion?
He concluded that America does not have a religion that will prevent it from destroying all people. This sort of intellectual justification for targeting thousands of innocents was core to their operations.
And just for context, while those were the primary grievances, we should note that in his famous 2002 letter to the American people, he even included abstract environmental concerns.
He did, like what he called the destructive policies of U.S. corporations. He listed that as an additional motive for the attacks, which really demonstrates the immense breadth of their perceived global conflict with the U.S.
So, to move from the ideology to the actual execution, we have to focus on the individual who is the primary driver of the physical plot.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, or KSM. The 9/11 Commission report identified him as the principal architect.
And KSM's resume was extensive, which is why he was so critical to the operation. He wasn't new to this.
Not at all. He was an advisor and financier for the 1993 World Trade Center bombing,
Yeah.
and he was the uncle of Ramzi Youssef, the lead bomber in that initial attack.
So he had a deep personal vendetta against the Twin Towers going back almost a decade before 9/11.
Oh, absolutely. And even before 9/11, KSM was instrumental in planning that failed 1995 plot, the Bajinka plot.
Which aimed to bomb several airliners over the Pacific.
Right. And although it failed, that operation served as a kind of proof of concept. It helped refine the logistics for using aircraft as weapons.
When did he first present this idea to bin Laden?
He first presented the idea for using planes to hit buildings to bin Laden in 1996, but it wasn't officially approved until late 1998 or early 1999, shortly after the embassy bombings in Africa.
And once it was approved, the core planning cell was established. Who was in that inner circle beyond bin Laden and KSM?
Ramzi bin al-Shibh was a key figure. He was the main coordinator and facilitator.
He was supposed to be one of the pilots, wasn't he?
He was. He was part of the Hamburg cell, but his repeated visa applications to the U.S. were rejected, which forced him to coordinate from afar.
And then there was Mohammed Atif.
Right, providing essential operational support. He helped with detailed target selection, finances, arranging travel logistics for the hijackers once they were chosen.
It's important to stress, though, that bin Laden wasn't just a figurehead here. He was heavily involved in the tactical decisions.
Very involved. KSM originally had a more ambitious scope, didn't he? He wanted to hit more targets.
He did. KSM had suggested targeting the U.S. Bank Tower in Los Angeles as part of the plan, hoping to hit the West Coast at the same time.
And bin Laden overruled him.
Yes, primarily due to concerns about the logistical complexity and just a lack of time required to coordinate an additional team and target on the West Coast. He preferred to focus the attack entirely on the East Coast symbols of American power.
The selection criteria for the 19 hijackers revealed the tactical sophistication of the plot. They weren't just looking for disposable foot soldiers.
Quite the opposite. For the 4 men who would serve as the pilots, Mohammed Atta, Marwan al-Shehi, Ziad Jarrah, and Hani Hanjour, the criteria were very stringent.
What were they looking for?
They had to be educated, speak English fluently, and critically have recent experience living in the West. That would allow them to blend in easily and navigate flight schools and airports.
And that search led them directly to the radicalized group known as the Hamburg cell in Germany.
Right. And the logistics of getting these men into flight schools and into the U.S. revealed significant clandestine support.
Indeed. The source documents detail that 4 men ultimately served as the pilots, and they entered the U.S. primarily between 2000 and early 2001.
And Hani Hanjour was a bit different from the others.
Yes, he already had a commercial pilot's license, though he was known for having poor flying skills and difficulty with English. The other primary hijackers, the ones intended to be the muscle, began arriving in the spring of 2001.
And to ensure authenticity and ease of travel.
KSM provided passports from corrupt Saudi officials to some of the incoming hijackers.
The pace accelerated significantly in the final months. By that summer, bin Laden was demanding the attacks happen immediately.
Yes. The final coordination meeting happened in July 2001 when Mohammed Atta met with Ramzi bin al-Shibh in Spain.
And that's where they finalized everything.
That was the moment. They finalized the targets, the sequence of events, and responded to bin Laden's increasing urgency to carry out the attacks without any more delay. Atta departed that meeting with the final encrypted instructions. All the pieces were in place.
So with the blueprint of the attack fully established, we now arrive at what is arguably the most frustrating and analyzed element of the 9/11 history.
The intelligence failures.
All the numerous flashing red lights that were missed, ignored, or actively withheld. This wasn't a failure to collect data. It was a failure of the system.
The warnings were abundant, stretching back years. The clearest example involves 2 of the hijackers, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Midar.
And the NSA knew about them.
As early as late 1999, the National Security Agency, the NSA, intercepted communication mentioning them. And the CIA had already been alerted by Saudi intelligence that they were established al-Qaeda members.
And what the CIA knew about them was just astonishing. The CIA's specialized unit, Alex Station, which focused on bin Laden.
They tracked them.
They tracked them to a high-level al-Qaeda meeting in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia in January 2000. And not only that, a CIA team even broke into Al-Amhar's Dubai hotel room and confirmed he had a multiple-entry U.S. visa.
So they knew he could get into the country.
They knew. The CIA tracked them leaving for Bangkok and then lost them, but they knew they were dangerous.
And this is the critical point of failure that the 9/11 Commission focused on. The CIA shared this intelligence with other foreign intelligence agencies worldwide, but not with the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Not the FBI, which is responsible for domestic security.
Right.
There was an FBI liaison to the CIA who, after learning that these two known al-Qaeda operatives were in the United States, asked for permission to inform the Bureau so they could be tracked. What was the exact response from the CIA official?
The liaison was explicitly told, this is not a matter for the FBI.
Just shut down.
Completely.
Huh.
Furthermore, when an FBI analyst, Margaret Gillespie, was told to review material related to that Malaysia meeting, she was specifically prohibited from passing that information to criminal investigators within the FBI due to policy constraints.
But the message was clear. This was turf protected by the intelligence side, not for domestic law enforcement.
So why? Why was there this almost deliberate obstruction of communication? What established this wall that prevented the sharing of information that could have tracked two known terrorists already inside the country?
It was a disastrous confluence of competing policies and, frankly, organizational paranoia. The wall stemmed primarily from Justice Department policies enacted in 1995, following past abuses of surveillance.
Okay, so the rules were designed to separate intelligence gathering, which operates with more latitude, from criminal investigations, which have to adhere to strict Fourth Amendment protections for use in court.
In other words, the fear was that if intelligence agents shared their methods like wiretaps with criminal investigators, those methods might be revealed in a criminal trial.
And that would compromise the CIA's sensitive sources and methods globally.
Precisely. This created an impenetrable legal and operational barrier, the wall, separating the intelligence community, so CIA and NSA, and domestic law enforcement, the FBI.
And later, then Attorney General John Ashcroft testified about this.
He did. He recalled that this bureaucratic wall was, in his assessment, the single greatest structural cause for the September 11th problem.
It made the FBI blind.
It rendered the FBI blind to two active al-Qaeda operatives living openly in San Diego and training on American flight simulators.
If the wall was the structural cause, the specific warnings that were subsequently ignored, they really demonstrate a profound failure of imagination and urgency in the summer of 2001.
Even when the pressure was mounting.
Indeed. By July 2001, senior counterterrorism officials were sounding full-volume alarms. Richard Clark, the National Coordinator for Security and Counterterrorism, testified that he was convinced that a major series of attacks was about to come.
So he put all domestic agencies on full alert.
He did, and warned them, something spectacular is going to happen here, and it's going to happen soon.
But specific actionable intelligence that could have linked the dots was still being dismissed or lost at FBI headquarters. Let's look at the famous Phoenix Memo.
The Phoenix Memo, sent in July 2001 by a Phoenix-based FBI agent, Kenneth Williams, was just chillingly prescient.
What did it say?
He specifically warned FBI headquarters about the possibility of a coordinated effort by Osama bin Laden to send students to the United States to attend civil aviation universities and colleges. He recommended an immediate nationwide effort to identify and interview all Arab students seeking flight training.
An incredible warning, yet what was the response from headquarters?
The warning was reportedly reviewed by only 2 agents who failed to share it widely or follow up on Williams's recommendation for a nationwide inquiry.
So it was essentially shelved.
It was shelved in the chaos of FBI bureaucracy, seen as an isolated field report rather than a potential key to a major threat.
And this pattern continued up to the highest levels of government. We have the presidential daily briefing itself, which landed on the president's desk just 5 weeks before the attacks.
That August 6, 2001, PDB was titled, Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S.
That's incredibly direct.
It is. And while it didn't specify the target or method, the memo explicitly noted that FBI information, quote, indicates patterns of suspicious activity in this country consistent with preparations for hijackings or other types of attacks. This wasn't generic caution. This was the CIA synthesizing domestic FBI information and concluding that the threat was imminent and domestic.
And finally, we have the most concrete piece of evidence that was actually seized but not utilized, the Zacarias Moussaoui case.
Moussaoui was a French national who arrived in the U.S. and enrolled in a flight school in Minnesota. He aroused suspicion in mid-August 2001.
Because he wanted to learn how to pilot a 747, but showed no interest in learning how to take off or land.
Right. The flight school alerted the FBI, who arrested him for overstaying his French visa. They suspected he was a radical extremist who had traveled to Pakistan.
And the field agents were so convinced he was dangerous that they desperately sought a warrant to search his laptop.
They did. They believed it contained critical information. But the request was denied by FBI headquarters.
Why?
Headquarters cited a lack of probable cause and told the agents that Moussaoui could not be linked to al-Qaeda or a specific plot, so the laptop remained sealed.
And had a warrant been granted?
It is now widely believed they would have found crucial operational details that could have potentially alerted authorities to the plot just weeks before September 11th.
When you look at that chain of information, 2 known terrorists inside the country, the Phoenix memo warning about flight schools, the PDB warning the president about a domestic strike, and an active suspect arrested but his computer left unsearched, it just paints an overwhelming picture.
It does.
The 9/11 Commission's conclusion that the attacks revealed massive failures in imagination, policy capabilities, and management wasn't hyperbole.
No, it was a factual assessment of systemic collapse.
The morning of Tuesday, September 11, 2001, saw 19 terrorists successfully execute their plan by hijacking 4 commercial airliners, 2 large Boeing 757s, and 2 767s.
And they selected these aircraft specifically because they were scheduled for long transcontinental routes,
Meaning they carried maximum fuel capacity.
which the terrorists intended to use to maximize the explosive and destructive impact upon collision.
Understanding the chronology of this day is essential, as the events unfolded with terrifying speed, giving authorities almost no time to transition from initial confusion to coordinated response.
We must proceed with solemnity here, recognizing that we are documenting the final moments of nearly 3,000 lives.
The first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, departed Boston at 7:59 a.m.
The hijackings began around 8:13 a.m. across the flights. The sequence of impacts began at 8:46 a.m., when American Airlines Flight 11, piloted by Mohammed Atta, was crashed deliberately into the World Trade Center's North Tower.
It struck between the 93rd and 99th floors.
And given the initial confusion, many on the ground, and even some personnel, initially presumed this was a terrible, if immense, accident.
That terrifying presumption lasted only 17 minutes. It ended with the second decisive strike.
At 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 struck the World Trade Center South Tower, impacting between the 77th and 85th floors.
And that second strike instantly eliminated any possibility of accident.
It confirmed that the U.S. was under a coordinated, pre-planned attack.
Meanwhile, the 2 other flights were approaching their targets. American Airlines Flight 77, which had departed from Dulles, was already taken over around 8:51 a.m. and disappeared from radar.
At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the west side of the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, impacting the E-ring, where a section of the building was undergoing renovations.
The force caused a partial collapse and a raging fire.
The fourth plane, United Airlines Flight 93, departed late from Newark, a delay of 42 minutes that would prove critically important.
It was hijacked at 9:28 a.m., but unlike the first 3, it never reached its intended target.
At 10:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93 crashed in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, during a fierce passenger revolt.
And based on evidence and the flight path, investigators believe its target was either the U.S. Capitol building, where Congress was in session, or the White House.
Yes. At 10:03 a.m., the ground phase of the attacks concluded.
The methods used by the hijackers were brutal but simple. They relied on the element of surprise and fear.
Details gathered from the cockpit voice recorders and phone calls made by passengers reveal they used box cutters and knives, including Leatherman-type utility knives.
Which, crucially, were not classified as banned weapons at the time.
Exactly. The hijackers also utilized mace, tear gas, or pepper spray to quickly incapacitate flight attendants and force passengers and crew to the rear of the cabin, isolating the cockpit.
On Flights 11, 175, and 93, passengers reported the hijackers claimed to have explosives.
Yes, but the subsequent FBI investigation found no trace of military-grade explosives at any crash site. The 9/11 Commission concluded the bombs were almost certainly fake, intended solely to frighten hostages into submission.
The terrorists' overconfidence, however, led to some critical communications mistakes.
It did. They had intended to communicate their demands only to the passengers, but due to their lack of familiarity with the cockpit radio equipment on American Airlines Flight 11 and United Airlines Flight 93.
They accidentally transmitted their messages across the airwaves to air traffic control.
This was monumental. Instead of taking hostages quietly, they immediately alerted ground personnel, particularly ATC in Boston and Cleveland, that the planes had been forcibly hijacked.
Which drastically accelerated the military and civil aviation response time.
Even if that response was ultimately too slow to stop the impacts.
The story of Flight 93, delayed by those 42 minutes, became the most powerful narrative of defiance that day.
Absolutely. Because they were airborne longer, passengers and crew were able to use airphone calls to the ground to learn that the previous 3 planes were not being used for negotiation, but as guided missiles.
They realized they were facing a suicide mission.
And that realization spurred remarkable collective courage. Passengers and crew organized an uprising at 9:57 a.m., deciding to fight back instead of being passive victims.
Drawing on reports of their final moments, we know they used a food cart as a battering ram.
And began fighting their way down the aisle toward the cockpit. Fearing the passengers would gain control, the hijackers, led by Ziad Jarrah, rolled the plane onto its back and pitched it into a rapid nosedive to prevent its capture.
Crashing into that field just 20 minutes flying time from Washington, D.C.
Their sacrifice saved what would have been another devastating attack on the nation's capital.
In New York, the initial strikes were followed by the terrifying sight of the complete, catastrophic collapse of the Twin Towers, a structural failure that shocked engineers across the globe.
The timing is telling. The South Tower, struck at 9:03 a.m., lasted 56 minutes before collapsing at 9:59 a.m.
And the North Tower, struck first, actually lasted longer.
It did. It was struck at 8:46 a.m. and lasted 1 hour, 41 minutes, and 53 seconds before collapsing at 10:28 a.m.
And crucially, the collapse of the North Tower caused massive debris that struck the nearby 47-story 7 World Trade Center.
Starting fires there, which burned for nearly 7 hours until it, too, suffered a complete collapse at 5:21 p.m.
The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, conducted an exhaustive study on the physics of the collapse. What was their core finding regarding why these buildings, which were designed to withstand a jet strike, actually came down?
NIST concluded that the initial jet impacts did not inherently bring the buildings down. In fact, as one investigator noted, the buildings did amazingly well against the impact force itself.
The problem was the fire.
The problem was fire. The plane's impacts stripped away the spray-on fireproofing insulation from the core steel columns. The subsequent office fires, fueled by the jet fuel and office materials, burned relentlessly, softening the now exposed steel.
And once that steel softened,
The floors began to sag under the weight of the debris and the heat. When the floors sagged, they exerted increasing inward tension on the exterior support columns, pulling them inward until they buckled.
which initiated a rapid progressive collapse from the top down.
Yes, it was sustained fire and gravity, not the initial impact, that destroyed the structures.
While this was happening, the air authorities were struggling to regain control. The Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, took a truly unprecedented step.
At 9:42 a.m., the FAA took the extraordinary measure of grounding all civilian aircraft within the continental United States,
They invoked an emergency protocol.
known as SCATANA, which stands for the Security Control of Air Traffic and Air Navigation Aids, for the first time in U.S. history. This effectively turned off the nation's entire commercial air traffic system.
And what did that entail for flights already in the air?
It meant that all flights were immediately ordered to land at the nearest airport. No new takeoffs were permitted until September 13th.
And international flights.
All international civilian flights already crossing the Atlantic or Pacific were either turned around mid-flight or diverted to other countries, primarily Canada.
Canada's response, known as Operation Yellow Ribbon,
It involved handling about 500 unexpected international flights and tens of thousands of stranded passengers with immense logistical effort and hospitality.
The military response, however, was hampered by the same systemic communication breakdown we saw in the intelligence reports.
Absolutely. Though fighter jets were scrambled from bases like Otis Air National Guard Base and Langley, NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, had almost no situational awareness.
Because of slow FAA communication.
Yes, the military was notified of 3 of the 4 crashes only after they had already impacted. Confusion reigned. There were false alarms about other hijacked flights, even unconfirmed reports of ground attacks, like a supposed car bomb at the State Department.
And what about Vice President Dick Cheney's shoot-down order, the authorization to shoot down any positively identified hijacked commercial aircraft?
That order was issued too late.
How late?
Cheney's order went out around 10:20 a.m. That's 8 minutes after Flight 93 had crashed, and just 8 minutes before the North Tower collapsed. By the time the order could be confirmed and passed down the chain of command, all 4 terrorist aircraft were already destroyed.
The human cost of September 11, 2001 is a central focus of remembrance. We recognize the resilience of those who survived and offer our sincere sympathy for the immeasurable losses endured by the victims, their families, and the first responders.
The official total death toll, tragically, was 2,977 victims, excluding the 19 hijackers.
And that figure is comprised of the 265 people on the 4 planes.
2,606 people killed in or around the World Trade Center and 125 lives lost at the Pentagon.
This remains the deadliest terrorist attack in world history, and it was a singular disaster for first responders.
We lost 343 members of the Fire Department of New York, the FDNY,
72 law enforcement officers from various agencies, and 55 military personnel. And this loss of life also transcended national borders. Citizens from over 90 countries perished that morning.
The circumstances of death in New York City reveal a harrowing calculus of fate and architectural vulnerability. In the North Tower, the initial jet impact destroyed all 3 staircases,
Making escape from above the 92nd floor virtually impossible.
It is estimated that between 1,344 and 402 people at or above the impact zone perished instantly or in the subsequent fire and collapse.
The South Tower provided a fleeting, tragic exception. Approximately 600 people were on or above the 77th floor when Flight 175 struck.
However, only one of the 3 staircases, Stairwell A, survived the impact, allowing a small number of people to attempt escape.
How many made it out?
Remarkably, 18 people from above the 77th floor were able to navigate the rubble and fire down Stairwell A and make it out alive. One of those survivors was Stanley Pramnath, an executive who saw the plane coming directly at his office.
He was buried by debris, but was pulled out and led to safety through that damaged staircase.
Yet the failure to order a full evacuation of the South Tower immediately after the North Tower was struck remains one of the greatest tragedies of the day.
Because the Port Authority and other agencies advised occupants in the South Tower that they were safe and should stay put during that critical 17-minute window.
And that meant the estimated 600 people above the impact zone who might have otherwise fled were tragically caught when the second plane struck.
And the circumstances for hundreds of others were just unbearable.
Source documents note that more than 200 people were forced by the intense heat, fire, and smoke to jump or fall to their deaths from the upper floors to escape the inferno.
The sheer scale of loss to single organizations was also shocking.
Most notably, the investment bank Cantor Fitzgerald, which lost 658 employees, more than any other single employer in the complex.
The day of terror may have ended at 10:28 a.m., but the suffering continued, transitioning into a long-term public health crisis centered on the toxic exposure at Ground Zero.
The collapse of the towers released hundreds of thousands of tons of pulverized toxic debris into the air. This toxic cloud contained an alarming cocktail of over 2,500 contaminants.
Things like lead, asbestos.
Lead, asbestos, cement dust, mercury, and known carcinogens like dioxins. This material settled across lower Manhattan, impacting residents, workers, and first responders.
And it is a sobering fact that the air quality did not return to pre-9/11 levels until June 2002.
This toxic exposure resulted in a severe and ongoing health crisis. Today, it is estimated that over 18,000 people have developed related illnesses, ranging from respiratory and digestive disorders to various forms of cancer.
And we have already reached a heartbreaking and profoundly tragic milestone with the FDNY.
Yes. The Fire Department of New York has now lost the exact same number of members, 343 individuals, to 9/11-related illnesses, as died on the actual day of the attacks.
This ongoing loss just underscores the severe, lasting consequences for the dedicated men and women who served in the recovery effort.
It's important to analyze the differences in protocols that emerged in the source materials, particularly the contrast between the Port Authority Police Department, the FDNY, and the NYPD regarding long-term illness.
The difference in operational strategy seems stark.
It is. The Port Authority Police Department, or PAPD, which had direct jurisdiction over the World Trade Center complex, implemented a strategy focused on limiting exposure.
How so?
Their officers were quickly provided with industrial-grade respirators, and the department drastically limited personnel rotation.
So they intentionally kept the same small group of 30 to 40 highly trained officers stationed at the pile. Why did that distinction matter so much?
By using a smaller, consistent pool of officers who were also immediately equipped with better protective gear, the PAPD drastically lowered the number of total personnel exposed.
Whereas the FDNY and NYPD.
They rotated hundreds, if not thousands, of different personnel from across New York City into the toxic site over weeks and months, often without adequate respiratory equipment in the early stages.
And this difference in exposure strategy is believed to account for the PAPD's significantly lower illness-related death toll.
Compared to the FDNY and NYPD, yes.
Recognizing this monumental long-term health challenge, the U.S. government finally established a formal response, passing the James L. Zadroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act in 2010.
That act, named after an NYPD detective who died of a related illness, allocated billions of dollars to establish the World Trade Center Health Program and the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund.
Providing long overdue comprehensive testing and treatment for people suffering from these long-term 9/11 health problems.
The attacks triggered an immediate, fundamental pivot in U.S. policy. The resulting decisions reverberated across the globe, fundamentally altering both our foreign policy commitments and the structure of domestic security.
The response from Congress was swift.
Just 3 days after the attacks, on September 14, 2001, the U.S. Congress passed the authorization for the use of military force against terrorists, or AUMF.
This resolution granted the president broad authority to use all necessary and appropriate force against those who planned, aided, or harbored the attackers.
And the AUMF is not just a piece of history, it's a living document.
Crucially, yes. It is the legal basis for all subsequent operations in the War on Terror and remains in effect today, decades later.
Its broad language has allowed 4 successive administrations to justify military action against groups that did not even exist on 9/11, like ISIS, as long as they could be linked to the original actors.
Internationally, the attacks triggered a historic response from the NATO alliance.
NATO invoked Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty for the first and only time in the organization's history.
Article 5 stating that an attack against one member is considered an attack against all,
signaling immediate and unified solidarity with the U.S.
That solidarity quickly transitioned into military action.
The U.S. military path began with the war in Afghanistan on October 7, 2001. The initial target was the Taliban regime for harboring al-Qaeda leadership, specifically Osama bin Laden.
But the scope of the subsequent war on terror expanded far beyond Afghanistan.
Far beyond. It came to encompass protracted and complex conflicts in Iraq, Pakistan, Syria, Yemen, Libya, and Somalia.
To speak plainly, the global cost of this response is almost incomprehensible in raw numbers. The source material draws on research from the Costs of War Project, which attempts to quantify this fallout.
The numbers are staggering. The Costs of War Project estimates the total human death toll, including military personnel, insurgents, contractors, and most notably the vast number of indirect civilian deaths across these multiple war zones.
From disease, infrastructural collapse, displaced...
Yes. That total is between 4.5 and 4.6 million people. Furthermore, these conflicts caused the massive displacement of 38 million people worldwide.
And what was the financial cost to the U.S. Treasury for waging this extended global conflict?
The total direct and indirect cost to the U.S. has been calculated at an estimated $8 trillion.
An astronomical figure.
It is. And it includes current war spending, but also future obligations, like lifetime care for wounded veterans and interest on the debt incurred to fund the wars. It's a monumental figure that dwarfs the estimated initial financial damage of the attack itself.
Domestically, the government performed the largest restructuring in American history since World War II.
Yes. The Homeland Security Act of 2002 created the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS.
Consolidating 22 different federal agencies, including the Coast Guard, Secret Service, and FEMA, under one massive umbrella to coordinate domestic anti-terrorism efforts.
And we also saw the rapid passage of the USA Patriot Act.
The Uniting and Strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism act.
Right. And that immediately drew intense criticism from civil liberties groups. What were the primary concerns?
The main concerns centered on its sweeping new powers. Critics argue that the act violated the Fourth Amendment by allowing the government broad access to citizen records, including library records, medical history, financial data with reduced judicial oversight.
And it also allowed for detention without charges.
Yes, it allowed the government to detain foreign terror suspects for up to a week without formal charges, raising severe due process questions.
And the most visible change for the average person was the creation of the Transportation Security Administration.
The TSA. It was created to federalize airport security, replacing the private contractors who had previously handled screening. Its mandate was to inspect passengers and luggage, fundamentally altering the experience of air travel with the implementation of standardized, stringent screening procedures worldwide.
The economic consequences of the attack aligned, ironically, with the strategic goals of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who stated one key motive was to destroy and bankrupt the U.S. economy.
The immediate financial shock was intense. U.S. stock markets closed for 4 days, the longest closure since 1933.
And when they reopened on September 17th,
The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 7.1%, marking its largest one-week point drop in history at that time. U.S. stocks lost an estimated $1.4 trillion in valuation just that week.
and beyond the immediate market shock, New York City suffered a massive blow to its economy.
New York City lost an estimated $27.3 billion in GDP over the next year. Furthermore, the airline industry faced near collapse due to the mandatory airspace closure and the subsequent fear of flying,
Leading to a cutback of nearly 20% in overall air travel capacity that year.
Moving from the economic fallout to the social consequences, the domestic atmosphere was one of profound fear, which translated into significant social backlash and hate crimes.
The social fallout was immediate and dark. Hate crimes against those perceived as Arab, Muslim, or South Asian surged almost tenfold in 2001, according to FBI data.
And tragically, we're still living with the legacy of that fear.
Data shows that these hate crimes have subsequently remained roughly 5 times higher than the pre-9/11 rate.
We have to highlight the specific anecdote of Balbir Singh Sodhi.
Balbir Singh Sodhi, a Sikh man who worked at a gas station, was tragically murdered in Mesa, Arizona, just 4 days after the attacks.
A hate crime.
Yes, he was targeted and killed solely because his turban led his attacker to mistake him for a Muslim or an Arab. This incident quickly became a horrific symbol of the domestic social fallout.
And this climate of fear also led to significant discrimination.
A 2002 poll showed nearly half of Muslim Americans believed their lives had changed for the worse since 9/11.
Finally, we should review the diverse range of international political responses, noting that not everyone reacted with uniformity.
The overwhelming majority of nations, including key U.S. allies, denounced the attacks and offered immediate support and solidarity.
But the government of Iraq under Saddam Hussein was a notable exception.
Yes, issuing an official statement that the American cowboys are reaping the fruit of their crimes.
Conversely, the reaction in Iran, despite decades of severe geopolitical tension with the U.S. government, was one of unexpected sympathy.
It was. Iranian citizens gathered spontaneously in front of the Swiss embassy to express their condolences, and some held candlelit vigils expressing sorrow for the thousands of lost American lives.
The task of securing accountability for the nearly 3,000 victims was immediate and immense, requiring the largest criminal investigation in U.S. history.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation launched the operation known as PNTP bomb, which stood for Pentagon Twin Towers bombing.
At its height, the investigation involved more than half of the agency's agents.
And it rapidly linked the attacks to Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda.
The swift identification of all 19 hijackers was helped significantly by a crucial piece of luck that speaks to the logistical chaos of the morning.
Yes, Mohammed Atta was forced to check 2 of his 3 bags onto his connecting flight from Portland to Boston because of space limitations on the commuter flight.
And because of a new airport policy designed to prevent flight delays.
The luggage failed to make it onto Flight 11. That recovered luggage contained the hijackers' names, their assignments, their final will and testament letters, and critical information connecting them to al-Qaeda.
Without that recovery, the identification process would have taken vastly longer.
While bin Laden was ultimately killed by U.S. forces in Pakistan in 2011, the principal architect, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was arrested in Pakistan in 2003.
KSM's detention and legal status are highly complex and controversial.
During U.S. military hearings in 2007, KSM confessed, stating that he was responsible for the entire 9/11 operation from A to Z.
And he claimed to have personally decapitated Wall Street Journal reporter Daniel Pearl and masterminded dozens of other plots.
But despite his confession, KSM and his co-conspirators, including Ramzi bin al-Shibh, who was captured in 2002, have remained in legal limbo at Guantanamo Bay for 2 decades. Why has the trial not moved forward?
The key sticking point is the use of evidence gathered through what the CIA officially designated as enhanced interrogation techniques,
Which were widely recognized as torture.
Exactly. The legal system has struggled to reconcile the need for justice with the need to adhere to due process, resulting in endless pretrial litigation.
And most recently, a potential plea deal, which would have seen the defendants accept a life sentence, avoiding the death penalty, was being negotiated.
But it was subsequently revoked by the U.S. Defense Secretary in August 2024, leaving the legal status unresolved yet again.
Beyond the direct conspirators, there is the enduring and politically charged controversy over alleged Saudi government involvement. A 2002 congressional inquiry produced 28 classified pages focused on foreign government facilitation.
Those 28 pages were classified for years by the Bush administration, citing national security concerns.
Their eventual declassification and release revealed the intelligence community had information about potential logistical support provided to the hijackers by individuals connected to the Saudi government.
Specifically, documents like File 17 named Saudi officials, including suspected Saudi intelligence officers in the U.S.
Who may have assisted hijackers Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mitar upon their arrival in San Diego.
And this debate led directly to U.S. law.
It did. The controversy fueled the passage of the JSTA law, the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act.
This act removed sovereign immunity in terrorism cases, allowing victims' families and survivors to sue the Saudi government for its alleged role in the attacks.
The Saudi government continues to deny any involvement, but the legal framework is now in place for these civil suits to proceed.
In the aftermath of the attacks, Mayor Rudy Giuliani stated, "We will rebuild. The skyline will be made whole again." That promise has largely been fulfilled, but it has taken nearly a quarter century.
Reconstruction efforts were bifurcated. The damaged section of the Pentagon was rebuilt and occupied within a year of the attack, demonstrating a rapid response.
But at ground zero, reconstruction faced significant political and financial delays.
It didn't truly begin until late 2006. One World Trade Center rose on the site, symbolically reaching its final height of 1,776 feet in 2013, a nod to the year of American independence, and opening in 2014.
What is the status of the complex today?
3 of the planned major towers, 1, 3, and 4 World Trade Center, are complete and open. The St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church, destroyed in the collapse of 2 World Trade Center, has also been fully reconstructed and reopened in 2022.
But 2 World Trade Center remains unfinished.
Yes, as of 2025, it's awaiting a major anchor tenant to finalize construction.
Crucially, the focus has also been on remembrance, creating physical spaces for collective mourning and memory.
In New York, the National September 11 Memorial Museum is a powerful and necessary site. The memorial features 2 massive reflecting pools set within the original footprints of the Twin Towers.
With the names of all the victims inscribed in bronze panels surrounding the water.
It's a profoundly moving, contemplative space.
And we can't forget the sphere.
The sphere, the massive bronze sculpture that stood between the original towers, was recovered from the rubble largely intact, though visibly scarred. It now stands as a powerful symbol of resilience and survival, installed as a monument at Liberty Park overlooking the site.
And the Pentagon Memorial.
That features 184 benches, one for each person killed there, specifically arranged to face the point of impact.
And finally, the Flight 93 National Memorial in Pennsylvania.
That site is marked by a visitor center overlooking the crash site, with the key feature being the white marble wall of names, which is meticulously aligned beneath the actual path of the final heroic flight of the aircraft. These memorials ensure the victims and the extraordinary sacrifice of that day are preserved in the national memory.
Our comprehensive exploration of the source documents has revealed not just the coordinated nature of the attacks, but that 9/11 was truly a devastating culmination of ideological warfare and profound systemic organizational failures within our own intelligence apparatus.
And the consequence was a single day of violence that initiated monumental and still ongoing global effects that vastly exceeded the physical damage of the initial strikes.
If we connect that final point back to al-Qaeda's stated aim, which was to destroy and bankrupt the U.S. economy, and then factor in the total cost of the subsequent war on terror, which we now estimate stands at $8 trillion and continues to draw massive resources and policy attention, what critical lessons should policymakers today draw regarding measuring strategic success and, more importantly, avoiding economic exhaustion when confronting future non-state actors? Thanks for listening.